This is Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Mark. And today's guest reminds me that not everyone is born at the right time. My guest is singer-songwriter Stephen Bluhm. To say he is an old soul is an understatement of the highest degree. I mean, the man put a Heckelphone on his latest album. Don't know what that is? Stephen does, and he explains it on the podcast. His latest release, Out of the Nowhere Into the Here, throws it way back. It's a brave album in so many ways, and once you give it a shot, you'll know exactly what I mean. But this album was started several years ago. In fact, he began writing this and his debut album at the same time. But Out of the Nowhere took a while to come out. You can probably guess why. Stephen is influenced by luminaries like Stephen Sondheim and Nick Cave, and they both find a comfortable place in Stephen's music. And he says he has no plans of writing the same album twice. If you listen to his first releases, you can tell he means it. But enough bumping gums. Go grab Out of the Nowhere Into the Here wherever you guys and dolls listen on the virtual ether. Pick it up on Bandcamp or check out stephenbluhm.fun. It won't be a trip for biscuits. And you can be aces by ponying up some shekels for a cup of giddy up at ko-fi.com/performanceanxiety. You can also get your boots on and check out threadless.com/performanceanxiety for some zooted out threads. And don't forget to follow us at PerformanceANX on the socials. Enough frisking the whiskers. Check out this real clam bake with Stephen Bluhm on Performance Anxiety, part of the Pantheon Podcast Network.
Hi, you're listening to Stephen Bluhm. My new album, Out of the Nowhere Into the Here, is out on streaming platforms and on Bandcamp. And I'm excited you're listening to the Performance Anxiety podcast, and I hope I've been able to soothe your anxiety a little bit with my deep voice. Okay, cool.
All right, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine, yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, welcome, and thank you for joining me this evening.
Well, thank you for having me, Mark. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
Well, let's just jump right into things. The way I like to kind of jump into everything is to find out about your early musical influences and your early musical experience. You know, what got you into music? Was it parents making you take lessons, or was it music that they played in the house? And you in particular have a very unique old soul sound. And so I am so curious to know what got you into music in the first place and what was influencing you early on.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mark. I was kind of honestly just wired with something that attracted me to music, to making music from my earliest memories. I can remember being 3. A lot of my earliest musical memories go back to being like about 3 years old.
Oh, wow.
My mom had bought me this little toy drum, and I remember just thinking up songs on the little toy drum, thinking I could hear melodies in it.
Oh, wow.
There was a piano in the house when I was about 3 that I was just fascinated by. Unfortunately, the piano didn't stick around. I don't remember why. It disappeared one day. Oh, no. But I do remember the piano and being sad it was gone. When I was a little older, I stayed at I guess I was in 3rd grade. I stayed at a friend of my mom's for when she was away for a week. And this friend had a drum kit, was a really pretty great drummer, and gave me the sticks and was like, have at it, you know. So I just played the drums all week. I loved it so much, and I didn't really understand in my 3rd grade brain how songs worked on the drums. So I was like composing songs on the drums, playing them in a specific order that I had arranged.
Okay.
And I'd go to school all day long in school, be fascinated by what I'd created, so excited to get back to the drums at the end of the day and play the drums exactly in the order that I'd arranged, my little songs I composed. Yeah, so
that is amazing. I'm
not trying to like tout myself as like a prodigy. It's not like I was creating something I would be proud of today as a young kid. I didn't start writing songs that I would still perform today until I was about 18, 19. But just to show like there was something about me that was just drawn to, anytime I'd be in a house with a piano in it, I go right for it.
Is there anything like that in the family? Are your parents, do they play instruments or musical? Or do you have any other relatives that were musicians or played an instrument?
Yeah, sure. Now, I think apart from that, both my siblings play instruments. My sister's 8 years older. My brother is 6 years older. My sister's always been, I mean, since I can remember, she was in like middle school band. She still is in a band playing trumpet, like a community concert band at Temple University. And my brother was in bands always from, I can remember from growing up. Okay. And he's now a gay nightlife DJ in the Boston area, but still like producing music. And so like, I think we all just, it's not like I was brought into music by them. I think we all just kind of sought it out. But as I got a little bit older, I started getting music from them. So I got quite an education. Then they being a few years older than me, I was born in 85. So they were more children of the 80s than I was. And so I got a lot of like older music from them. And so I've always loved oldies too. Like actually about 3 years old, I remember Rock Around the Clock being my favorite song. And there's just always been something about the freedom of like 50s, 60s music when that music was first being created by younger people for an audience of younger people. It's like there's so much excitement and freedom in that music. So yeah, does that answer your question, Mark?
Yes, it does. So what was the first instrument that you formally started to learn?
I think I'm still trying to formally learn an instrument. I play the piano on the album. Those songs are about, and the guitar on the album. Okay. Those songs are about the only songs that I can play on the piano. Those and a few other ones I wrote and some Bach for beginner songs. So now I'm going back and learning how to be a better pianist. I'd say my dad and stepmom bought me my first guitar when I was about 14. And that I stuck with. Okay. I was in band as well, playing the drum when I was about in fifth grade. That didn't last for very long. And violin lessons for a few months. But like I'm still playing the guitar. I've been playing that for quite a while. When did you start playing with other people? I mean, did you start playing in bands or did you start just going out and playing on your own? I always started, I've never really played in a band. I was in a friend's band in Philadelphia for a while. It's no longer with us, the band. It's called Kiss Kill. It was a fun experience. But in terms of my own music, I've always been kind of a loner. Maybe growing up, I'm from the country, from very rural Pennsylvania, and there just weren't a lot of people into the same music around. And then I sort of just started doing it on my own. And then when I went to Temple University myself in Philadelphia, I started doing the open mics there when I was 18, 19, and I'd started making synth pop. I don't know if you heard the first album I put out, but that's all like synth pop stuff. And cool. Wow. So different. Thanks. So different. I want to talk about that in a second because it's so different from, heck, why don't we just get into it? Sure. How long did it take you to write that first album? I mean, was it something I hear so often that, my first album took years, it took me 5 years to write it and record it. And then I did it. And then I had to do my second one in 6 months or so. So how long did it take you to start writing the material? And had you been writing for a long time before you started that first album? Yeah, I've been writing for a long time. I didn't have the finances necessary to put together an album like that for quite a while. I understand that. And it's kind of hard to say because it's not like I sat down and wrote a block of songs and then was done. It's like I collected a bunch of songs that I wrote over the years to put on that album. It's kind of the same deal with the second album. It's just the second album's some songs I wrote recently over the past couple of years. Some of them are bits and pieces from like when I was 22 that I brushed up into shape more recently. Okay. So if I had to say it took a long time, probably did take a couple of years, both albums. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Before you skip over this ad, give me 1 minute. Like most podcasts, I pick sponsors carefully, and I use the products that advertise here. Pure Spectrum CBD is a product that has been really beneficial for me. They have a wide variety of great products that can be used on a daily or as-needed basis. I've been using the tincture every day, and it's been wonderful for easing anxiety. And I absolutely love the isolate. I use it instead of acetaminophen or ibuprofen, and it's worked so well for the relief of aches and pains. They also have soaks, lotions, salves,
gummies, and more, plus an entire line for fitness recovery. They even have products for your pets. See everything they offer at purespectrumcbd.com. And if you have questions, they're there to help. They helped me when I had no idea where to start. After you fill your cart, use code PerformanceANX for 15% off your purchase. Pure Spectrum CBD, Pure Spectrum CBD, Pure Spectrum CBD. The first album, and like you mentioned, it's got some really great synth pop, and it uses a lot of more conventional instrumentation than your new release. But there's such a connection between the two because your crooning style of singing and I guess the Tin Pan Alley bones I can hear in that first album, but they're so much more pronounced in the second one. I guess my question. Well, all right. So what happened was I listened to your new album first.
Sure.
And then I went back and I listened to the self-titled debut. And it's a very strange thing because I'm listening to this throwback of an album that's just so awesome. And then I hear this, your debut, and it's such a departure isn't a word because that was the first one. I guess it's just such a different style than the next one. It was almost hard for me to reconcile that it was the same person because I'm hearing something similar to the first album in a lot of the songs, but then I hear this wild synth line or a distorted guitar, like the easy come and go.
Sometimes I get so unforgetful. Whatever I said before, I don't know, you know what I mean. I haven't called home in a while. My solitude sort of is, they're the ones who make me me. Sometimes I get
sure.
That's a great song, but it's so much different from what you're releasing on the second album. What made you go and pare the instrumentation and the electronics down and out from the new album, or for the new album, I guess would be a better way to say that?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'll say a lot of the two albums I wrote kind of concurrently, and my tastes are very eclectic. To me, Mark, it's all just words and melody, and you can change up the instrumentation. And I could have put the songs on Out of the Nowhere into the Here to synth if I'd wanted to. It'd just be a different sound. It's not about that. It's just, for some reason, the newer songs, they just felt like they wanted that kind of sound to me. And what was I saying? I guess I like so many different kinds of music. It was like I started to have a group of songs that I felt needed the orchestral kind of instrumentation. And then I wrote a few more and put them together. It was like these ones kind of go together in this sound. And these ones kind of go together in the synth pop disco sound, you know?
Okay.
And then there are a couple albums that really drew me to this kind of sound. I'm a big fan of Nick Cave's Boatman's Call and John Cale's Paris 1919. So I felt like those two albums were kind of influences in my mind of where I wanted to go with a new album.
Okay. So I was going back and, like I said, listening to the first album. So now that you mentioned what you had done, that, you know, it wasn't that you had just pared things back. It was one group of songs that felt better this way and another group that felt better in another style. Okay, so that makes more sense. Like, because I was listening in April Showers. That is the closest thing I've heard in a long time to a Morrissey tune that Morrissey didn't write. So I love that song. It's and your performance in it is awesome. It's so good.
Oh, thank you.
I have a sea and some April showers. I have a sea and some April showers and a sharp mind. I'm never drunk nor high. I want some weed to help me rest, unwind, and watch the sky. When I'm upset.
Well, I'm delighted to hear you. Yeah, sometimes I feel like listening to my music can be nice because it's a little bit like listening to some of the classic Morrissey stuff without the xenophobia. I'm not, but you can kind of feel good about it. It's funny, when I was writing like songs more like April Showers a long time ago, I would get the Morrissey a lot. And then when I started writing funkier songs like My Beautiful Boy, people started saying David Byrne, which I felt a little bit more comfortable about.
Okay. You know, I didn't even think of yes.
I think a lot of Mashka Bluhm. 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 Every day I'm thankful I'm not in high school anymore. Meeting people I adore, kicking habits I abhor.
That's funny.
That's funny because, all right, so that's the song that really, My Beautiful Boy, it's the one that really, I'm like, this isn't even, it sounds like the same guy singing, but it doesn't sound like the same person wrote this song. It's so different.
Sure.
It's amazing.
Well, thank you. I'm so delighted that you have that reaction. That song, My Beautiful Boy, was, I think of it as kind of an Italo disco pastiche. And like I say, I like so many different kinds of music. I love that old disco and the Italo disco. And a lot of the lyrics in Italo disco are so silly.
I don't even know what Italo disco is.
Well, it's like synth disco that was made in Italy in the 80s. So as disco kind of phased out as disco kind of phased out in America, it didn't really phase out. It just changed into other stuff, you know, like Madonna and house music. But, you know, we say it kind of died out. They just kept making it in Italy, and it's a lot like My Beautiful Boy, to the clock.
Okay.
Very, you know, the beats tends to be in European music rather crisp. Yeah. And then I'm a big fan of Sparks, who kind of really opened the door for how silly you could be in a song. Yeah. But I like to challenge myself as a writer and do different things. I don't want to have all it be one sound.
Well, I appreciate that. And the new album is, well, all right. So it took, I guess before we go into too much detail about it, it took a few years between the first album and the new album to come out. So were you still writing? Were you playing the music out live? Were you road testing it? What was going on? Because the first one, I believe, came out in 2017, and then the new one's coming out in April of this year.
That's correct. It's funny, when I actually was just before I did a show in my area in the Hudson Valley for the album release for the first album. I did a show of the new album material. And so I thought, oh, I'm releasing this first album. I've got the second album. I'm ready to go with a whole new album, you know. But I was glad it took a little bit of time because I did have more time to hone the songs. And then it took a while to do the arrangements, which I wrote all the arrangements for too. So, you know, just that takes a long time.
I can imagine.
And I had a full-time job at Etsy.com. So, like, you know, when you have a full-time job, it's pretty tough to fit this in.
Oh, sure.
A project that ambitious. Yeah.
So did you get a chance to play the music out very often? I mean, you know, like you said, having a full-time job, is it difficult to go and play dates?
Yeah, I'd say so. And especially like out of the area. And of course, everybody was distracted by the pandemic. I had bought a house. I greatly underestimated how much time that was going to take out of my life. But I'm sitting in a house, and it gave me a nice place to put a grand piano. And so I recorded the album on my own piano and in living rooms and whatnot. So, but yeah, you know, that I think everyone's lives changed over the past few years. So it did take a little bit of time. When I started recording with the musicians, just recording the musicians and mixing took a couple years. When I started recording the musicians, we were still wearing masks.
Oh, wow.
Still pretty early days of the pandemic.
So this current album was recorded way back, or it started recording back then.
I started recording the album about 2021, about the summer of 2021. So Yeah.
So you've been working on this for quite a while then.
Yes.
Excuse me.
So, yeah.
So not only were the songs already written or partially written, some of them were written, like you're saying, because you separated which ones sounded better as synth and which ones sounded better in this, what I've seen described as chamber pop, which I want to ask you a little bit about that. But then it took some time to record, and then in the pandemic, and then so this album's been a long time coming for you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and anybody that will hear it, I hope will hear it. That, it takes a long time to record all those instruments and write their parts and write all the lyrics and do all the singing and do all the mixing and do it's really a long time,
especially if you're doing it yourself.
And now I'm looking back on it, going, why the hell did I put myself through that? That was. But I have this album, and I'm delighted by your reaction to it, because it's like, oh, I guess I wasn't crazy.
No, not at all. Not at all. So, like I said, it's been described as chamber pop. Now, you've already mentioned a genre that I'm not familiar with Ital Disco. Chamber pop. Can you describe that a little bit more for me? What exactly would
it's like? Chamber pop? Sure. For me, it's kind of like a lack of a better term. Like, it's just like, it's really hard to put the album in a category, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective.
I like fortunately.
Did you say unfortunately?
No, I like fortunately because it's such a unique sounding album. Right.
It's basically just pop songs with not a full orchestral accompaniment, but a chamber accompaniment. So one cello, I think there are 3 violins. As opposed to when we say orchestral pop, we might be talking about, I don't know, larger Frank Sinatra, where there's a whole orchestra behind it.
Right. Okay.
So when you hear a small group of instruments around me, and I recorded the instruments one by one out of necessity. But as I say, in living rooms, I kind of wanted it to have a very organic feel. It's sounding like it came. Sounding good, but coming from a living room to your living room. Yeah. I left in a lot of it's so easy to smooth everything out with digital, to make everything so crisp and clean.
Yeah.
And to my ears, a lot of albums can be overly produced in that way, where everything is just so perfected. I left in a lot of things that I think other people wouldn't leave in. Little things that go off pitch slightly or out of time slightly. To me, it's like the ear needs a little bit of something to grab onto. That's like a mountain climber climbing on a surface. You need just a little something to grab into. And so, if it's just wrong, it sounds bad. That would be embarrassing. But just like slightly off, so that it sounds human.
Exactly.
That to me is ideal.
Exactly. I love it. It's kind of like, that's one of the reasons why I'm a fan of Matthew Sweet. It's because he'll leave in little accidental noises or things that were accidentally caught on tape. Or I believe one time I read that one of them I think their guitar strap had broken while they were playing the song, and their guitar fell to the floor, and he left it in the song. I don't remember what song it was, but I 100% agree with you that if it's too perfect, there's nothing to catch you. There's nothing for your, like you said, your brain to grab onto and hold on to.
Yeah, right.
The album has this theatrical sound to it, and I'm not very familiar with like musical theater or anything, but it sounds like there's an element of that to it, or an influence, maybe is a better term, like a Sondheim and I'm going to reference the only composers I know of musical theater, Sondheim and Rodgers and Hammerstein. So was that an influence in writing any of this?
Oh, well, you hit the nail on the head. I'm a massive Sondheim fan.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, excellent. Yes.
Yeah. Richard Rodgers too. Sure. I mean, what a machine, just turning out 1,000 beautiful melodies over careers with many different lyricists. Yeah. It's kind of amazing to marvel at all that he turned out. Sondheim in particular. And I felt, I'll say, about the saddest I felt with any celebrity death when he passed away a little while ago.
Oh,
and I wondered why. I remember when Lou Reed passed away. I'm a major Lou Reed fan. I didn't quite feel... I think it's because Sondheim was such a teacher.
Okay.
Like, you can go on YouTube and see so many videos of him instructing students and giving talks. And much of his life was about being a teacher. And so I actually just learned directly from him teaching. You wouldn't really learn Lou Reed teaching you directly.
You probably wouldn't want that either.
Maybe not. Certainly, you pick things up from listening to his music, but you don't really think of him as a teacher. Sondheim, his role had a teacher, so I felt like, not that I ever talked to him or wrote to him, but I felt I had a kind of a more relationship with him. So.
I never really. I'm going to have to look that up because that's another thing. I didn't realize that there was so much information or video out on YouTube to check out.
Sure. Yeah. And I'll say his collected lyrics, Finishing the Hat, if you open them up, you can get them at the library or whatever, there is an instruction on how to write lyrics. It's so informative. And I think everybody should read it who is interested in writing lyrics, not just musical theater lyrics, because he breaks down how rhyming works, how syllables work, in a really just concise way that any writer could benefit from.
Oh, that's good to know. I'm definitely interested in that. Mentioning that there's musical theater influence. Is there a connection between the songs? Is there a story behind the album as a whole? Or is it more of a collection of songs that you'd written?
I'd say it's more of a collection, to be honest. It's not really a thematic piece all the way through.
I will say that one thing that I did notice pop up in several songs that I absolutely loved was the mention of God, which is not, it's not exactly a normal topic to bring up anymore, unfortunately. I mean, and I love and I appreciate the presence of God in this album. You know, and like I said, in this day and age, and you know, any positive mention of him is often frowned upon. So your songwriting and about God, around God, I think is beautiful. So, and I wanted to thank you for that.
Well, that's very sweet. That's very touching. Yeah, that's very perceptive too. I think it's a little bit on the first album and the second album. I think that writers benefit from having something that they come back to. Sure. You hear it, and I'm influenced, as I already mentioned, Nick Cave's The Boatman's Call, where he goes very much into God and spirituality and Christianity as a theme that he keeps coming back to in his work. And he and I are both influenced by Leonard Cohen, who does the same thing. And I think that Nick Cave would say more that he calls his music religious. I don't really think of, I guess because in America especially, there's a religious music, there's Christian music, and that is not what I am.
No, not at all.
As a writer, returning to the theme of like the big question, it's just stuff that's on my mind, just keeps coming back. Yeah, okay. I guess I'll say on Wissahickon, You Hear It, which is a song about a specific place in Philadelphia, a creek that is a state park and canyon that's really strange to walk along it today, because if you were just transplanted there, automatically you would have no idea you're in the middle of Philadelphia. It's a beautiful park.
Oh, really?
Very much you're in the woods along a stream.
Sleep beside the Wissahickon if you're not chicken. Good enough for any Wiccan to dip their toes in. From your lips escapes a prayer. Do you believe in God? As you are, she sees you there. She's nodding as you nod. Streams of consciousness.
There are all these ruins around and historic buildings that you kind of run into in the woods. That's just a mysterious, strange place. And it turns out in the early 1700s, religious cults lived in caves along the canyon.
Oh, wow.
Doomsday cults.
Oh, my God.
They were called the Brothers or the Hermits of the Wissahickon. And so I just wanted to capture some of the feeling of walking alongside the creek today. It was someplace, I used to live in Philadelphia, so
okay,
I was exploring it on my bike, and the song was about going back there again.
I never knew. I lived about an hour outside of Philadelphia when I grew up in New Jersey, and I'd never been through that. Never checked that out. Never knew about it. I still have family up that way, so next time we go up there, I'll have to suggest a trip.
Sure.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
I don't know when this interview is coming out exactly, but on March 22nd, the music video for Wissahickon will be appearing on YouTube. And What I did for that is I had a good friend of mine, Talon Hare, shoot it, who was a Temple University student at the time. And it's just beautifully shots up and down the Wissahickon Creek, so that audiences outside of the area could see what it is I'm singing about and actually see that it's a real place and not just a dreamed up word in a song.
Where you can dip your toes in.
Right.
You know, I mentioned the presence of God in this album. My favorite song on the album, not only does it mention him, but it also has my favorite string arrangement on your album, I Never Feel Alone. I absolutely love that song. The way it ends, the strings at the end, oh my God, it's so beautiful. Album.
That's great. I'm so glad, and thank you for sharing that with me. It's always interesting to hear what songs are people's favorites, and I'm glad that it's always a different one. If it were always the same one, I think, oh great, I have one good song on the album. But it's always a good sign when people pick different favorites.
Well, you'd mentioned you'd mentioned arranging the strings, and that is my favorite arrangement that you did on the album. So who's involved in the strings? I mean, who else is playing on the album besides you? You've got this incredible group of musicians on strings.
So on the strings on that album, the cellist Jordan Gunn, Gunn, Jonathan Talbot, Tinyon Lee, David Wooden might be on that album playing violin, and Dan Hoke plays double bass, and that just comes in at the end. It just is a simple dum dum at the end. A lot of the musicians I got on the album, so I live close to Bard College. I was just listening to your Steely Dan episode. Steely Dan actually met while being Bard College students. It's an amazing music college, and it's nestled in the woods in the Hudson Valley. And I thought, where am I going to find, because I live in a fairly rural area here in the Hudson Valley. You know, there's a lot of culture here, but not like a lot of orchestral musicians around, except if you go to Bard College.
That's your deposit.
The orchestra, the orchestra now is the postgraduate orchestra. They all already have masters. They've already been through conservatories.
Oh, wow.
They're about to graduate and go off and play orchestras around the world. They're absolutely fantastic. And you can go hear them, which I like to do from time to time. And I went down to a concert looking at the stage thinking like, how am I going to get some of these musicians? And I was with my friend Heidi, and she was saying, oh, we could talk to the director after the show. And I thought, well, the musicians are right here. So I actually, it's college. So even though it was a big show, it's not like walking up on stage on Carnegie Hall. But at the end of the show, I walked up on the stage and I saw that the French horns were all just standing around getting their photograph taken. And I thought, oh, okay. So I just stand there and wait for them to be done. And then I just say, hello, I'm a local songwriter. Does anybody want to be on my album? Not really knowing what to expect, but why not? Yeah. And a couple of them actually were like, yeah, I would love to.
Oh, that's awesome.
And the French horn, I just chose the one who was the most enthusiastic about it. I didn't need 5, unfortunately, but Sarah Kinbalin came, and it turned out that Sarah, although was studying orchestral music, they want to go into playing indie pop music. And
oh, wow.
That's exactly right up their alley. And so, Sarah came and was one of the first musicians I recorded. And then Sarah, I think, introduced me to other players, the oboe player, JJ Sylvie, I think Sarah maybe helped me get Jordan Gunn. I can't remember. But at the same time, there was a concert series going on at a church in Red Hook, New York, where a lot of the musicians from Bard were going and playing recitals. So I went there, and I really enjoyed going just about every week and hearing what they had to offer, and then kind of asking around there if anybody wanted to be on the album. And they helped me get a number of other players from the conservatory orchestra.
So there's a wide variety of people on this album then.
Yeah, exactly.
I saw that the song Easter, which I love, so delicate. It's such a beautiful song. that was released almost a year ago now. Was that planned as just a single release and added to the album, or was it part of the album to begin with?
I feel such gratitude. One, for the day that I was born. Two, for the day that you were born. Three, for the day that we met.
That was part of the album to begin with. And what happened was I put out immediately after the album was mastered. I waited about 6 or 7 months for the vinyl to come back. And I wanted everything to be ready for the release. But at the same time, I still wanted people, I was excited about the new music. I wanted people to be able to hear something. And so I released it around Easter of last year. And that way I could start getting the word out about what the new stuff was I was doing. Every time I'd be in a conversation with somebody, I'd have something to point them to.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So that's basically what that was about. Yeah.
I'll tell you one of the other songs that I keep going back to. There Is a Light. Mm-hmm. That is what I love. I love that as the way to end the album. The sequencing is so good on this. Was that difficult to kind of pick out a sequence for the song? I know there's like a whole science behind that, and I would love to actually do a podcast episode on that.
Oh, sure. Thanks for the question. It definitely was difficult, partly because I sequenced it also for vinyl. And so I didn't actually end up with the sequencing I wanted exactly.
Oh, really?
I wouldn't have had Easter go exactly after Everything Is Better Now That You Are Around, like a sort of slow piano to a slow piano. Yeah. But because of spacing requirements, I just had to have something I just had to have one side be 19 minutes and the other side be 19 minutes. It just had to be, and that was the best I could do. Yeah. I didn't want two waltzes next to each other. I didn't want a song that ended with me singing immediately next to a song that began with me singing. So I wanted something that had an instrumental break before me sing. I didn't want the two acoustic guitar songs to be next to each other. So they're split. They're kind of symmetrical, the one before the ending and the second one in. And then, I just wanted to keep the mood varied. So each one was a little different. And then I had to have Any Little Thing be at the beginning, because the intro to Any Little Thing, I think, sets the tone for what the album is going to be. It's an announcement. Here we are in this world for just a moment, as all the instruments, a large group of them anyway, are playing all at once at the beginning.
It's nighttime here. There's a traffic jam somewhere. Though it's cold out there, it's warm in.
And then I couldn't follow anything. I didn't think was after. I couldn't follow anything after There Was a Light. So There Was a Light ends the album.
Man, you just brought something up that I completely forgot about. Is that you've got to sequence this not just in the way you want, but also to fit on each. If you're making a physical copy, especially vinyl, to fit one. Oh God, that's gotta be so difficult. You want it one way, and then you're like, well, I can't do this because it won't fit.
If you're as exacting as I am, it doesn't really. Maybe I overthought it. It could be, I don't know.
You're also releasing an instrumental version of the album, which that is so cool. You don't see very many people doing that. I love that idea. How did you come up with that, and what's the reason for that?
Thanks. Yeah, I actually one of the reasons is that you don't really see it very often, but the songs work as instrumental compositions to me. A couple people in my life were like, I love these songs. I just love to hear them as instrumentals too. And probably a couple people goaded me on to try to do it too. I don't know if it was just my idea in a vacuum, but what happened was I was going to release the album and then go back and do it. But because of costs, the mastering engineer had to have both of them together. So that was another thing that kind of delayed the album release, was going back and doing the instrumental tracks as well. And they're the same tracks, except that on most songs, there's no piano playing the melody. So where there's no melody, I recorded one of the instruments. And then because There Was a Light is musically, it's the same thing 5 times in a row. I thought that'll be a little bit boring to listen to. So I have a clarinet duetting with a Heckelphone, actually, which is a funny story. The Heckelphone, there's only 100 of them in existence.
What is that?
It's a cross between a bassoon and an oboe that was created at the request of Richard Wagner. And
wow!
And it's a fairly new one that he's playing. It's just the bassoon maker Heckel makes the Heckelphone, and they only turn them out every once in a while. And he just happened to have one, a Bard student down the road, and I thought, well, what do you want to play it on the album? It turned out to be, I think, really a great sound for the album, kind of perfect for it. He plays it on the instrumental version of Wissahickon as well.
Okay. And
it's just like one of those sounds where you might listen to it and you might go, what is that instrument playing now? What is that? And you look at the liner notes to try to figure it out.
That's a perfect reason to go back to the liner notes. I love liner notes. I grew up reading liner notes. That's how I found some of my favorite musicians, is reading liner notes. So anything that can get somebody into reading the liner notes, I'm 100% for. So
cool, Mark. Yeah.
Do you have plans to perform this album live in the near future and support the album? Or is it going to be more of a local thing, or just a few dates here and there, or maybe play a little tour somewhere?
I am about to play it in a few days. Let me see. There are a couple of things I might want to say here. One of them is, so I worked for Etsy for 12 years.
Oh, wow.
And you might have read about all the layoffs happening to all the tech companies in the news. I was laid off back in December.
Oh, wow.
And the timing could not have been better. It's really like, I'm not looking at it as a bad thing at all. I mean, I liked the job and I love my coworkers, but what an opportunity to have put so much time and effort into making this album and then have some time off to give it a proper release while like doing some hunting for a job afterward. So I've booked a number of local shows in the Hudson Valley. My big album release show will be at the Avalon Lounge in Catskill, April 25th.
Okay.
I'll do another one for Greenkill in Kingston, New York on May 22nd. And that will be also a streaming concert. So anybody in the world will be able to tune into that.
Oh, cool.
And then I'm also just working on booking shows outside of the area. Yeah, that was something I had a hard time doing before. And yeah, I feel really strongly about this work. Your feedback is certainly giving me a nice boost too. So I really want to do a good job getting it out. The first album, I kind of put it up online. I spent all the money on the album, so I didn't have the money to do much promotion with it. And then it was just getting a band together when the pandemic hit. So nothing really happened with it. This album, I don't want to make that same mistake again. So I would very much like to do shows in other areas. The songs work with me just on a piano and guitar, so I can do them on my own. I don't need to tour with a huge group. But
okay. Well, that was going to be my next question. Is a show, a Stephen Bluhm show, is that going to have both albums, songs from both albums on it, or would that be kind of a pain to do?
Well, it would definitely be a pain to like bring a synth disco band and then an orchestral band to the same, a group or a chamber orchestra to the same show. It would be wonderful, but I would have to have a huge budget to be able to do that. So if anybody out there has a whole bunch of money they don't know what to do with, contact me. But
yeah, me too.
Until then, like I said, the songs can certainly work with lots of different kinds of arrangements. I mean, the way I like to think of it is if I'd given the songs a banjo and folk guitar arrangement, they'd be Americana songs. They're just songs. You could do them a lot of different ways. True. So what I'm doing now is doing shows that's pretty much just focused on the new material with a group of orchestral musicians, a smaller group, maybe 5 or 6 at the most. And then after a while, I'll start to meld it into the older material and what I'm going to do next after this. The album, I don't know quite what I'm going to do after this. I know it's not going to be another one of these. I like a lot of different kinds of things. I don't want to make another chamber pop album. I'd like to take what I learned maybe bring chamber influences into it, maybe some different kinds of musical textures with different instruments, but I don't think it's going to be another one of these. So it'll meld into, the live performance will meld into something else where I've got a band with me.
Well, it makes me wish I lived a little closer to you, unless you're planning on coming down to the DC area, because I would love to hear what you do with this music live. I'm a huge fan of live music, and so I always love hearing how things translate from the recorded version into a live setting. So I'm immensely curious to see what you do with it. I imagine that the transformation will be will probably sound quite similar to the album. So that's a huge plus, because I think the album is beautiful.
Thank you.
And like I said, I'm always a huge fan of live music because you can feel the music, not just hear it. And so I think I would love to feel this music being played.
Thank you so much for saying so. And I would love to come down to the DC area. So if you know some people I can contact, I'd love to do the whole Northeast area. That
would be amazing. I'll have to look out and see if I know any cellists, violinists in the area. I have some contacts. I can reach out. I do know some venues that would be perfect for you. Let's stay in touch and we'll see if we can work on that. Why not?
Talk off the podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
But thank you. I'm so glad that you have that reaction. Like I said, it's nice that you care and nice that I wasn't crazy.
No, you absolutely not. Well, what's the best way for other people to find the album? Either order it or pre-order it and follow you to find out where you are going to be performing.
Sure. It'll be on streaming platforms on April 19th.
Okay.
And it'll be on Bandcamp for vinyl and CD.
Excellent. I love Bandcamp.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Is there a social media presence or website that people can follow to check your shows and everything else you're doing?
Yeah, please do. I'm very active on Instagram, and my website is www.stephenbluhm.fun.
.fun. You're the first .fun I've had on here.
StephenBluhm.com was somebody doing pet photography or something like that. And so I saw .fun in the mix of ones I could claim. I thought, oh, well, I'm pretty fun.
You are. And the music is fun.
Sure.
So why not? It fits.
Yeah, it's a little catchy.
Yeah. Like I said, I've really enjoyed getting to know this album, and just like I said, the first time I listened to it, I hadn't read anything about it. I just decided I was going to put on and listen to it, and it caught me by surprise in the best way possible. So I've listened to it so many times, and I'm going to continue listening to it. So I look forward to seeing what you do next and following what goes on, because your music is unique. It's definitely got an old soul to it, just like you do, obviously. And thank you for spending your evening with me and just explaining and talking about the creation of this music.
Oh, thank you so much, Mark. And I really admire your podcast quite a bit. You've got a great energy, great way you communicate with people.
Well, thank you so much.
It's been a joy to tune into it.
When I sleepily asked where thoughts and ideas come from, waves electric danced up my tummy and gave me some. There was a light, there was a lovely light, but I'll never know if it was all in my mind, or was it a light?